Hi everyone, I'm Lydia, the product manager for Wikidata, and I'm here with my colleague Sam, who is the product manager for Wikibase ecosystem. We want to give you an overview of what happened around Wikidata and Wikibase over the past year and where we see us going from here. Let's start by taking a look at where we are and check out some statistics. Today we have 11,800 amazing people who are active editors on Wikidata. Thank you. As you can see, we had quite a jump during the heights of the lockdowns. A few weeks ago, we also crossed the landmark of 1.5 billion edits in Wikidata. For comparison, we crossed 1 billion edits just in August 2019. When we look at content on Wikidata, we can see that we now have over 94 million items describing concepts in the world. And on those items, we now have 1.34 billion statements we make about the world and everything in it. About 10% of those statements are external identifiers, so links to other websites, catalogs, databases, and so on, making Wikidata highly connected to other resources on the web. But we don't just have items describing concepts in the world, of course. We also have lexemes that describe words, like in a dictionary. Today, we have 580,000 lexemes across several hundred languages. And the final numbers from me for today. Reuse. How is Wikidata's data used? Right now, we are getting about 8 million Sparkle queries to the Wikidata query service every day. That is quite a lot for a publicly accessible endpoint. About 71% of all Wikipedia articles make some use of data from Wikidata. Not all of that is visible to the reader. Some of it, for example, is in categories. And for those like me who are yearning to travel again, Wikivoyage is the project family with the highest percentage of articles making use of data from Wikidata, with over 94%. Here are just a few of the people and organizations outside Wikimedia that are using our data to build really cool stuff. From civic engagement tools to digital travel assistance to crime and corruption reporting to helping us learn and understand our world better, to name just a few.
We saw some really exciting growth this year in the Wikibase ecosystem. Between this time last year and today, we saw about a 32% growth in the number of active instances, which was really significant. And as you can see here in these examples of Wikibases that are out there in the ecosystem, you might see some projects that you're familiar with, for example, Lingua Libre or Rhizome and FactGrid, as well as these pretty well-known pilot projects by national libraries, such as the German and French national libraries. But there are some new and exciting projects that have been happening around Wikibase as well. One example is the European Commission's Cohesio project, creating an EU knowledge graph of data relevant to the citizens of the EU, as well as enslaved.org, which is a Wikibase containing hundreds of thousands of records related to the historical slave trade. We've also seen some new communities of practice forming around Wikibase in the world of libraries. The Wiki Library Manifesto came out and was signed by a number of national libraries, museums, and university libraries, with the goal of creating and implementing a single linked open data network for arts, culture, and science. We also saw in 2021 that the Wikibase Stakeholders Group was launched. The goal officially of this stakeholders group is to commission the production and maintenance of open source extensions to Wikibase, which is really exciting. It's an incredibly well-run group that meets regularly and consists of both institutional and individual members.
Now let's take a look at what happened over the last year. On the Wikidata side, data quality was and continues to be important, because we obviously want to provide reliable and verifiable information to the world. Here we worked on understanding, improving, and securing data quality. To help us all better understand data quality, we improved how ORIS, the machine learning system, measures data quality so it's more accurate and in its quality assessments. For each item, you can now get a more accurate score that tries to tell you how high or low quality an item is. We also developed a small tool to measure how many constraints violation an average item has so that we can track that over time. Constraint violations are the editor-defined rules that the data in Wikidata is checked against. You can see them with little icons sometimes next to statements. This includes rules like a person shouldn't have died before they were born. Right now, we have about 0.2 relevant violations per item. The last thing we did here was take a closer look at the different types of issues that we encounter in Wikidata's ontology, so how the different concepts are connected to each other, to better understand how these issues happen. This is important because the ontology makes it harder to build applications with our data if it has issues. In terms of improving data quality, we developed two new tools, the Item Quality Evaluator and the Curious Facts tool. More about them in a second. And we improved which changes from Wikidata show up in the watch list and recent changes on Wikipedia, for example. So all the relevant changes and only the relevant changes are shown there. In terms of securing the quality of the existing data, editors have decided to semi-protect properties as well as some highly used items to make it harder to target them for vandalism. And we're seeing more and more that especially the large Wikipedia projects compare their local data with Wikidata's data automatically with some special Lua code. And then pages where the local data on the page does not match Wikidata's data are put into special maintenance categories that people can work on. This helps make the whole system quite a bit more robust. Let's take a look at the first tool I mentioned, the Item Quality Evaluator. It looks like this. It lets you enter a list of item IDs or a Sparkle query that gets you a list of item IDs. And when you ask it to check those items, it gives you the ORIS quality score for each of them, as well as the average. Here's my sample of random festivals, then where you can see that apparently St. Patrick's Day is the item with the highest quality score in my sample. This tool is especially helpful if you want to find the lowest quality items in the topic area you're interested in and then improving them. This can also be a great tool for an editor to work on improving items together, for example. And the second tool is the Curious Facts tool. The world is interesting and weird and fascinating. There's a woman marrying the Eiffel Tower. There's a cat who was the mayor of a town. There's a country with 2 capitals, and so on. Stuff that defies our expectations. And this tool analyzes Wikidata's data for outliers like that. These outliers could be something like generally curious things happening in the world, or it could be an issue with the data in Wikidata. The tool shows you an anomaly it found, and then you can see what's going on. Let's move on to the cursors. There will be a more detailed talk about it later today, and I will only give you a sneak peek right now. The search platform team at the WMF has been working a lot on scaling the query service so it can keep up with the growth and popularity of Wikidata. They have developed a new updater for the query service that will help the query service better keep up with the fast edit rate that's happening on Wikidata. They also did research to better understand the content composition of Wikidata to learn how that might be helpful for scaling. And third, they did a survey to better understand the priorities of everyone who uses the query service and figure out how that can help us prioritize certain things for scaling. And of course, we did some small improvements that hopefully make many of you happy. For example, you can now add a title to your query by using #title, and it will be used in the result visualization, so it's easier for others to understand what they are seeing when looking at your query result. And last but not least, we released the Query Builder. It's a form-like interface to build queries for anyone who doesn't want to deal with Sparkle. It doesn't offer the full complexity of Sparkle, but it's still fairly powerful already. I hope this will open up querying our data treasure to many, many more people. Now let's look at lexicographical data. Lexicographical data definitely got a lot of attention over the last year and has grown a lot. With abstract Wikipedia on the way, even more so, because lexicographical data will be a fundamental building block for abstract Wikipedia. To help us focus a bit better, the abstract Wikipedia and Wikidata teams asked different language communities to come forward that want to work with us more closely during the development. And I'm happy to say that we were able to select Hausa, Igbo, Dagbani, Malayalam, and Bengali as the communities that will be trailblazers and who are already adding and improving lexemes on Wikidata as the base for future work on abstract Wikipedia, alongside many others, of course. There's still a lot of data missing in this part of Wikidata. To help figure out which words are still missing and needed, and which ones are needed the most, we now have the lexicographical coverage dashboard that Danny created. It looks at a Wikipedia and then checks how much of the words in that language Wikipedia are still missing from Wikidata's lexemes. You can then get a list of the most frequently missing ones, so you can add them and increase the coverage for that Wikipedia. Now let's take a quick look at some of the amazing things people are building with Wikidata's data. There are quite a few civic engagement projects popping up that make use of Wikidata's data. Here, for example, is Face the Facts. It's an app that was released for the last election in Germany. It lets you scan campaign posters on the street and then gives you information about the politician and the party to help you better understand who you might potentially be voting for. Or here we have the election tracker by Data Story, and it gives you a timeline of upcoming national elections from all around the world. And then we have Gov Directory, a project by our very own Jan Einali and Eivind Larsen, and it makes it easier for people to get in touch with their government to make their voices heard. But of course, we also have more fun applications popping up, like here, Link People. It's a website that visualizes connections between people in movies, TV shows, and books. So next time you're scratching your head about how are all these people in the book you're reading related to each other, this website might help. We might be very focused on data on Wikidata, but we sure do love art. Here's one of many websites that uses our data for information about artwork. It's called the Painted Planet, and it lets you see paintings of places in a country. And the final thing I want to highlight is the best thing. Tom Scott, a popular science YouTuber, wanted to figure out what the best thing is. To do that, you obviously need a list of all the things that can potentially be the best. Here, Wikidata comes to the rescue. He took items from Wikidata as the things to vote on. He presented his viewers with pairs of those things and asked which of those two is better. Repeat that many thousands of times, and ta-da, we have the best thing ever. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Go watch it yourself and find out what the best thing is.
So one of the most significant initiatives for Wikibase in the last year was the Release Strategy and Infrastructure project. Users as well as developers in the ecosystem were telling us that they needed more predictability in the timing of releases of the software, as well as clear instructions for how to upgrade from one version of the software to the next. As a result, we've established regular 6-month release cycles, meaning every 6 months a new version of Wikibase can be expected to be released. And we've also built out a new deployment pipeline and processes to support the release of Wikibase Suite. Another way that we're supporting easier installation and updating of the software is through improved documentation. So to support releases going forward, we have new instructions for both installation and updating the Docker images. And now each release will also be accompanied by detailed release notes so that you can tell either as an administrator, a user, or a developer what has changed since the last version of Wikibase. The first version of Wikibase released under this new release infrastructure happened in May. This new release is based on MediaWiki 135 and contained 3 key features. One is federated properties, which I'll tell you a little bit more about shortly. The next is Wikibase manifest, and the third is Wikibase pingback. The new Docker bundles that we have released also include even more helpful extensions and tools to help you get started faster with Wikibase software. And finally, we have been working over the last couple of years on enabling deeper connections between Wikibases so that they can share content and ontologies. Wikidata continues to play a really important role here, and I'll give you an idea of why when I show you the following slide. This is a screenshot of what the federated properties feature looks like. The first version of this feature that we built and released in May of this year allows you to use another Wikibase's properties in place of any local properties, meaning if you enable the feature, you could set up a Wikibase to use all of Wikidata's properties. And this was a very interesting feature. It was a way for us to get a lot of learnings about how to approach this technically. But what we heard during feedback gathering was that people really wanted to be able to have both local properties, so their own local data model, as well as make references to remote properties, such as those on Wikidata. And so that second version is what we have been spending our time building out in 2021. This new version of federated properties will make it possible to enhance your local set of properties with remote properties, such as those from Wikidata.
Now we want to take some time to look at the big picture. Over the past months, we took time to understand where we are and where we want to go and what's going to be important along the way. When I think about what we are working towards, then ultimately I want a thriving linked open data web that makes the world better. A linked open data web that consists of Wikidata and many other Wikibase instances where communities can co-create high quality, verifiable, multilingual data. And it all comes together in a diverse global knowledge graph. And when you look at the why we are building this global knowledge graph, then I want people to be able to have a say in and influence the data that underlies the technology we all use every single day. I want many more people to have a say in how we describe the world around us and how we organize our knowledge. And to make that happen, we need to make it easier for people, companies, and institutions to build new apps and services that allow exactly that and change the world for the better. We make this happen on Wikidata every single day already, and as the Wikibase ecosystem is growing, we are getting closer and closer to that vision of a diverse global knowledge graph. And yet there's still so much more to be done, both on Wikidata and in the Wikibase ecosystem. When you look at what is important for Wikidata, then you can boil it down to 3 things, I think. An amazing community that collects and maintains high-quality data, which is then used to build great applications, which in turn encourages more people to join our community. Keeping this in mind, there are a few things that we see changing around Wikidata now. The first one is that data quality continues to be really important. And as Wikidata becomes more integrated in a lot of the technology people use every day, the pressure on us to keep the quality of our data high continues to increase. This is especially tricky because in the majority of cases, people consuming our data in an app or similar have no idea that the data they are seeing is actually coming from Wikidata. This also means they're not able and encouraged to contribute to Wikidata and become part of our community. And this is something we have to address now if we don't want to burn out. Related to that is the second change that I'm seeing. More contributions will come from outside wikidata.org through other interfaces, like the Wikidata Bridge, specialized mobile apps and specialized contribution tools similar to Mix and Match or the Wikidata game. That means we will have to prepare for a world where a lot of contributions are made by people who are never coming to wikidata.org. And we need to find ways to make this work. And we need to make sure that those contributions are meaningful and fit into the bigger picture. And the third thing I want to highlight is the growing Wikibase ecosystem. Over the last year, we have seen more and more Wikibase instances be set up by institutions, research projects, and more. And this trend will continue. And I hope we will embrace it on many levels as we are already starting now. The first Wikibase instances are, for example, now looking into using Wikidata's properties, and with some upcoming features, more of that will happen. That means people will rely even more on our properties being stable than they are already. Another area that I hope we will embrace is relying on other Wikibase instances and their communities to maintain some of our niche and special purpose data that might not have a place on Wikidata. And last but not least, I hope we can rely on some of the Wikibase instances in the Wikibase ecosystem to become primary sources for underrepresented data so that we can then use them as reliable sources to include a subset of it in Wikidata. Taking all that together, what does this mean for us? What should we be focusing on for Wikidata? For me, there are four areas. Empowering editors to increase data quality, equity in decision-making, increasing reuse for impact, and knowledge of and about underrepresented languages. I will talk what I mean with each of them. The pressure on Wikidata to provide high-quality data as well as the incentives to manipulate our data are increasing. At the same time, the growth of Wikidata's content is outpacing the growth of our community and our ability to maintain that content. That means, for me and my team, we need to ensure that the socio-technical systems we have are set up in a way that helps us all to increase the quality of Wikidata's existing data and contribute high-quality new data. Equity in decision-making. Decisions taken on Wikidata matter. They have an influence on Wikidata and far beyond it through the reuse of our data, our ontology, and more. And we want to ensure that we are being thoughtful and inclusive when making these fundamental decisions that shape Wikidata. My team and I will want to support more people to be able to meaningfully take part in those decisions so that Wikidata's data is able to support more equity in the world. We're focusing here on the decision-making instead of the day-to-day editing because I believe that these fundamental decisions are much, much more impactful and important because they have a lot of influence on the day-to-day editing later. To ultimately have a positive impact on the world, our data needs to be reused. We want more of that. But we don't just want to increase any reuse of our data. Of course, anyone is free to use Wikidata's data, but what matters for Wikidata is more a particular type of reuse for projects that are aligned with Wikimedia's vision and mission and values, as well as those that are actively giving back and becoming part of our community instead of just taking our data. And the final area is knowledge of and about underrepresented languages. Wikidata is a multilingual project and has been from the start, but with the introduction of lexemes, it became even more so. To truly support underrepresented languages, we still have a way to go, both technically and in some terms of content. So we, for example, get to the place where we really can build meaningful applications on top of the data we have in lexemes to give many more people access to knowledge in their language through, for example, abstract Wikipedia.
So what's important for Wikibase? To grow and thrive, the Wikibase software project needs a holistic ecosystem around it. This includes, yes, really diverse and interconnected knowledge hubs, different data being maintained by different groups, but all supporting a common goal of releasing more knowledge freely and openly to the world. But we also need to make sure that there is a community of extension and tool builders that can rise up around Wikibase to better support the variety of use cases for the software. In recognizing all of that, and also in acknowledging what Lydia shared earlier about the overall vision for Wikibase and Wikidata, there are 3 areas where we can be focusing our attention. And the first is improving onboarding into the Wikibase ecosystem. I'll explain in a little bit what I mean by that. Enabling more extension and tool building. And finally, deeper interconnectivity between Wikibases. So we would like to ensure that more projects can independently onboard into the Wikibase ecosystem. And we see our role there as reducing the complexity of the setup of the software, importing data into a Wikibase ecosystem, and maintaining your software by, for example, updating from version to version. Right now, what we're hearing from the user community is that it is difficult for non-tech savvy individuals or projects that don't have a lot of funding to hire a helper to help them to install, set up, and maintain the software to get things going. And by making it less complex, making it easier to do these things, we envision that it will make it possible for less resourced projects to engage with Wikibase, meaning you don't have to have a big budget in order to be working with this software and use it to free up more data. We'd also like to ensure a healthy ecosystem of extensions, tools, custom UIs, and so on can develop around Wikibase. This is important because the different knowledge curators out there, the different institutions and projects will have really different use cases. And as a generic software product, Wikibase can't fit all of them perfectly. So being able to extend the functionality of the software for more use cases is really important. And then finally, we would like to ensure that Wikibases can connect with each other to share concepts, to share ontologies, to share data, and as well to connect to Wikidata so that we can form this linked open data web that Lydia mentioned that is more powerful than the sum of its parts.
You've now seen the longer term areas we want to focus on, but that's no fun without knowing what's really coming next, right? For Wikidata, what we are working on right now is the mismatch finder. The idea is that we can compare Wikidata's data against other databases and find mismatches between them, which are potentially errors. For example, if Wikidata and the German National Library have a different date of birth for Goethe, someone should probably have a look and see what's going on there. The mismatch finder lets you review the mismatches and determine if any change in Wikidata or the other databases is needed. The next topic we'll be tackling is lexicographical data, specifically improving special new lexeme, the page that is used for creating new lexemes. We will make it easier and more understandable and more usable, so more people will be able to add lexemes for words in their language. And the third major thing in the making is the REST API, as the first step towards making it easier to get our data and build applications with it. We have published the specification, and I expect us to start coding on that early next year.
So up next for Wikibase, we'll be conducting user testing of the new version of federated properties that I mentioned a little bit earlier. We'll gather feedback and use that to improve the user experience, as well as ensure that the feature works as expected with core extensions and tools. We will also be working on something very exciting. Wikibase Cloud is a hosted Wikibase solution that Wikimedia Germany will be offering in the not so distant future. And this platform, which will be based on the open source project WBStack, will make it possible to much more easily create a new Wikibase and keep it running without having to worry about doing your own software updates and so on. So we'll be sharing more information about this shortly, including a very exciting sneak peek at what it will look like when we launch. And finally, we're going to be engaging directly with stakeholders, including developers out there in the Wikibase ecosystem, to find out what are their needs, ideas, and plans for new extensions and tools that are built on top of Wikibase. Our very first requirements gathering session for this is actually happening during this conference during the Wikibase track. So if this topic is of interest to you, I really encourage you to join us.
Sam and I want to close with a few words of love about Wikidata and Wikibase from others. I will start with Wikidata. Not long ago, the UK Parliament's data team wrote, "Our admiration for Wikidata and for the people who work with it knows no bounds. Having a source of well-modeled, massively interlinked, well-managed data that anyone can query at the press of a button is a real thing of wonder." Thank you all for being a part of this and making exactly that possible.
So I would also like to leave you with a quote, this one about Wikibase. It comes from Dean with enslaved.org. He says, "A lot of projects get built and often they disappear. There's all that work and data and it just goes away." So that's also what we asked ourselves. How can we do this in a stable way that can go forward? And that is for us one of the most exciting things about working with Wikibase. Wikibase has a sustainable community with a lot of people working together. It's so true.
Thank you so much. We hope this gave you some useful insights into Wikidata and the Wikibase ecosystem. We are happy to answer a few questions now, and you can reach out to us during the rest of the conference or send us an email at those email addresses. Thank you so much.